Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the show.
Hi, John. How are you? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, we're into season four, and you are my first guest. I got a new
Oh,
background. You can see. I mean, maybe you're not. You can see, but the people following the show can see that everything's a little different. I even got a new shirt.
it looks great. Actually, I love all the stuff in the background. It just fills it up with a nice motif and vibe.
Yeah, and I can see you would like that because of what you got behind you there as well. Diamond Dragons. I was looking through your website and checking out your books, and we're definitely going to get to that. But before we do, you seem like a fascinating person. Why don't
Oh,
you
well,
tell
thanks.
us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I mean, I guess people will find out and decide one way or the other. If they're like, I don't like this guy at all. He seems like a chump. But where would I start? I would just basically try to sum everything up and say that my background is like 30 plus years in production. And what do I mean by that? Because that's a big kind of umbrella. Acting, directing, writing, singing, fight choreography of all things, and fencing. I was a fencing instructor for many, many years, and I also competed, and I have my share of golds and silvers and bronzes. Nothing Olympic or anything, but the point being is, I've done a lot of these things that we file under the storytelling, like I said, umbrella. Sound design. I designed over 9,000 sounds. It's over 9,000. And I was also very big with the idea of doing voiceover work, mostly in my own projects, but I did some VO work for other folks as well, because again, that's part of the acting vibe, is
Right.
to embody characters not only through your behavior and what the writer has written for that actor, but also the vocal tone. I guess people often maybe don't really think of it that way, like how important it is for some characters to be up here and be like, "Hey guys, we got," blah, blah, blah," and their tempo being extremely fast, and others being like, "Hey, listen to me, shut up." That's like a completely
Nice.
different style, but how often people will say, I never really thought of that. That's right. This character voice must be a baritone or bass kind of thing, and
Hmm.
their tempo needs to be much slower and more elongated. And this guy needs to be sort of, I mean, not to give a reference, but right, Joe Pesci with, okay, 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 guys, listen, listen, okay, okay, okay. Like that's funny. And we've also seen, I know I'm kind of, going on here, but like Joe Pesci play these hardened, devastating, psychopathic killers. So it shows you that juxtaposition of not only how voice um, factors into storytelling, but the rhythms that characters have. But anyway, that's kind of giving you at least a window into my background with storytelling and production.
Excellent. Well, I'm a big voice fan myself. I did ADR editing for a number of years.
Oh, there you go,
So,
right? So
yeah,
you completely understand like just how important that is to the entire production process. If the
absolutely.
ADR is uh, sketchy or there's problems and you're like, oh no, we don't have all this material and we're not going to get either reshoots or whatever re-records,
Hmm.
you're like, oh man, I don't know how we're going to pull this one scene together because the audio is totally broken. That's
Yes.
not good.
What part of the country are you from?
I'm from the United States,
And what part?
California.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love California. Yeah, I had dreams of moving there when I was 17 years old. I thought as a musician that would be the place to go because I think the population of California is similar to the entire population of Canada. So I figured
Right.
I could find my niche there a lot quicker than I can here.
I suppose it just depends, right? I mean, I will say this is too. I think I told you this in some previous emails that some of my VO artists are from Canada and whatnot, and I'm proud to say that too. Like I always tried to reach out from different places and get different folks of different walks of life. I actually had one gal from Scotland, of all
Mm,
places,
yeah.
record. She's a wonderful voice, and of course, I was being very specific about the types of voices I was going to cast to do some just brief voices for some of my characters in some of
Yeah.
the video projects that I've released, which
Okay.
which people can find on my website if they like, and through my YouTube channel. But the point being is, in addition to doing all the writing on the books, yeah, I would draw on these vocal actors. But so yeah, a lot of several of them from Canada, and I love them. They're great, great people.
So let's talk about your books. I've got four of them up here. We'll talk about them in order. They're all called Diamond Dragons. Is the first one where the subtext says time is the only resource for which no creature may bargain? Is that
That's
the one?
correct.
Tell us all about that.
The taglines to each book do hold not only meaning to the storytelling itself for not only each individual book, but they all tie together. Um, uh, in a way, I'm giving a spoiler that I probably shouldn't be, but that's okay. I seriously doubt that most people would catch on to these things until or if they, read all of the books and whatnot. And there's more to that that they will find if they read the books. The poetry has meaning, and when you first open all of the books, Diamond Dragons one specifically in this case, you're treated to the very first six lines you'll read is six lines, three rhymes. And, for the, I don't want to say untrained eye or maybe just the, new person reading, they might think, well, okay, whatever that means, and then continue reading and reading and reading. But by the end of the book, they might be like, oh, I think I get it now. Holy crap. Then there's book two and three and four, and I would then say by then they might be like, wow, now I really understand why this poetry is in these books. It's not just simply a bunch of pretty words on the page, not making it sound dramatic and cool. It's like, holy crud, this actually applies to the storytelling in ways that I didn't initially understand or imagine. And on another layer with that, John, is I would posit that if people looked at the poetry, they might be able to be like, wow, I could apply this to my own life, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. So these four books, and we're only, starting on the first one, which I still don't know what it's about, but I imagine there's dragons involved.
What
Are
gave it
they
away,
are
right?
these stories that continue? Like, can you pick up book two and read it independent of book one?
That's a great question. So, yes, I tried to design the books in a professional way where it's almost like akin to, well, I don't want to necessarily compare them directly to like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Die Hard, if you will, or
Mhm.
whatever, but they are heroes' journeys, kind of akin to the way Joseph Campbell would have taught.
Okay.
Regarding, the hero of a thousand faces, a hero's journey, this kind of stuff like that. But I wanted to make sure that if for whatever reason people were like, I'm going to read Diamond Dragons 3, and they're like, oh, cool, did you read Diamond Dragons 1 and 2? Nope, just going to start with the third one. I mean, I don't know why anybody would do that, but I did want to make sure that they stood on their own.
Hmm.
That said, it would be a little like watching Rocky 3 first, and then you might wonder
Right.
what the heck's going
Mhm.
on, what's the big deal with these guys? And you're like, oh, yeah, you didn't know that from the previous one that guy
Sure.
died, and that
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, exactly,
So,
exactly.
but it's still like you could read them individually and still have a wild ride, follow everything to a point, and just be wowed by that kind of new universe that you're delving into, all the world building and the character arcs and all this kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
Dime Dragons 1 is essentially the log line of it would be like an ancient society of dragons race against time to prevent their enemies, the bone and ghost dragons, from enslaving, capturing, or imprisoning or destroying a legendary firebird of, old or whatnot. So, in other words, it's sort of a race for the MacGuffin, if you will, which is a
Mhm.
weird term. Some people will be like, what the hell's the MacGuffin? I'm like, it's like in Mission Impossible. They're like, we need the codes. And everybody's like, what the hell's the codes, dude? Like, they're the codes. You got to get the codes. And you're like, okay, the codes. But right, or R2D2, he's got the plans, so we need the
Right, right.
plans. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, he can blow up the Death Star, so everybody wants that.
Sure.
Race from the it's a mad, 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 mad world, right? It's
Mhm.
a race for the money,
That's
you
right.
know.
Yeah. So it's a community of dragons. Are there human beings in this as well?
I will let readers find out more about how that functions, but I think
Okay.
it's almost crystal clear from the beginning when people begin, reading chapters one and th two, three, four, five, six, that they'll be like, wow, this is a different uh, galaxy, is a different planet. The planet is compared, I use the narrator to compare it to planets like Saturn or Jupiter, which are enormously larger than Earth. And that's whether readers do or do not know that, but it's actually true, right? Jupiter and Saturn are ginormous compared to Earth. But so quickly people will realize they're like, I want to say that it feels like dragons in general are the main species that inhabit this planet. And sure, there are creatures and little birds and little squirrel-like things and that kind of stuff. And there are other like subsets. There's dragonflies in the story as well. And so I think people will they'll quickly understand like what's going on is not directly revolved around humans.
Well, I guess there's dialogue, right? It's in English. So
I
the dragons
Yes.
speak English, or the dragons speak something, and you're interpreting the fact that they're speaking and you're interpreting English, or did we just assume they speak English?
No, that's also a great question, John. I appreciate you asking it. So, in terms of dragon speak, if you will, and I'll put it in quotes or whatnot, um, there is a new language that I place into the book, but I do not expect the reader to comprehend all these things, and I don't belabor it by having a bunch of lines in my dragon speak and then just have to keep translate. I think it's
Mm,
ridiculous.
yeah.
Granted, at the beginning, I make sure to use a few of these lines, and then you understand them by context. And I don't
Okay.
want to say they're throwaway lines, but they're the kind that, like, even if you didn't understand what they said, you quickly get that they're greetings
Yep.
or their farewells or something. And then throughout the narration, not only book one and book two and book three, whatever, the narrator helps explain what some of the words are when it's appropriate. And I tried to make sure to do this in a very judicious way where it did not take away from the storytelling. But yeah, you will quickly start to learn the word for, well, their word, if you will, for dragon, and then their word for like ghost or bone
Hmm.
dragon.
Hmm.
For example, the word for dragon in my storytelling is Zell, like Zell. And then they use a term Zentzel, which essentially means death dragon to them, you know?
Okay.
So then you start going, oh, I see. This language is kind of like, if I understand a few of the words, I get it. Death dragon is like dead dragon, but still alive, whatever. And then they have Iszel, which represents dragonfly. And some people might think, oh, is that kind of like little dragon? It is, but they also have Bozel, which basically they refer to for their children dragons, like
Hmm.
baby dragons or not older dragons. And they have ones for wise ones like you and I, John. We would be Chisel.
All
You
right.
know,
All right.
but right, you just think, okay, I get it. They have a hierarchy, but it's
Sure.
not like so convoluted and like
Yeah.
this guy just uses all these crazy words and they expect me to know it. It's like, no, we slowly unfold it, and it makes sense. You start to
Right.
get the feel of, oh, well, right, this is the older wise dragon. No wonder they call him by this title,
Yeah.
and so forth.
And I suppose in the narrative, you talk about what they're saying to each other, so you don't have to put it in quotations. You just in the
Uh,
narrative, you explain what's going on.
It depends. Like there are some cases where a word comes up that I, as a storyteller, want to highlight. And for example, I will say this, John, is so I've met many people in my life where they have come from different, languages and ethnicities and backgrounds. And so sometimes I've discussed with them, hey, there's this one word. Is there a word in Spanish for this? Or hey, I want to talk to you. Is there a word in Korean for this thing? And sometimes they're like, you know what, Matthew? There isn't. There is no word for that. But we have it as pretty close, and it means like, and then they explain it. I've always enjoyed that, John. And so I've not only made some of the words familiar to people of different walks of life. For example, the dragons will say nay or nayes or nayest for no. And nay is Swedish. Now, I don't spell it the same way, but like if they see the dragon saying nay, blah, 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 you'll be like, oh, someone who's maybe Swedish reading the book, blah, 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 be like, hey, I want to say he's putting Swedish in here. And then other ones might recognize another word and say, this looks suspiciously like our word for friend in what French, Spanish, Latin, whatever. And so this is not by accident. I've done all these things with purpose, but at the same time, I don't expect anybody to understand them outright. And I do. I use the narrator every now and again to be like, okay, they're going to explain the word
Yeah, for
Iyayali.
sure.
Like, what is Iyayali? Um, Sounds bigger. It's more syllables, and
Hmm.
what they seem to be saying this in this certain circumstances when it's very dramatic or whatever. So, anyways, I'm kind of
Yeah.
uh, truncating all of this, but yeah, there's dragon speak in it, and I do on my website offer a PDF where people can just look up the words individually. Stuff. I want to say there's like 50 words that I probably something like that I explain. There's also spells and whatnot, which I won't go into big time here, but people can be like, wait, what the heck? There's earth and air and water. What the heck is going? Wait a minute, I didn't see any spells being cast in the first half of Diamond Dragon. What the hell's going on? And they'll be like, yeah, you got to wait for that stuff, you know?
Do you want to touch on book 2 and 3? Is 2 the one that says wisdom is earned through listening, but not solely in what we hear?
That's correct,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh,
again, another ominous possible quote, or one where people have to, as Shakespeare would say, must give us pause, right? Makes you think about these lines, and you're like, wait, what's going on with these taglines? And then they read the third book's tagline, the fourth book's tagline. They might start to recognize a few things going on. Maybe,
mm-hmm.
maybe it depends because I put quite a bit of philosophy and psychology and psychological aspects into my work. And to kind of make a comparison, although I wouldn't want to compare myself to Tolkien directly, it's like we all kind of understand, if people are familiar with Lord of the Rings, the sort of psychological journey that Frodo is going on. It's a big one, and it's way less physical than most people would really think of it. Sure, when Frodo had to go with Sam to the volcano, this is a difficult and arduous physical journey. However, I would argue that what Tolkien had done with his work is made Frodo's journey far more psychological. It was way more of the stuff that destroying his mind was part of that journey. And for him to have to stave off, again, the ring, if you will, um, that is one of the key things about a hero's journey that makes it powerful, that makes us connect to it. Even the Luke Skywalker thing was super powerful. We know that George Lucas purposely made sure in Empire Strikes Back to have the whole like, he's like, wow, there's something not right here. What's in that cave? And he's like, in you must go, right? And then he's like, but what's in there? Only what you take with you, right? Then he goes, starts going, he's, your weapons, you will not need them. And he's like, yeah, I don't know about
Yeah.
that. And of course, ironically, I've never seen an essay on this too. I will say this, John, is what if Luke had not brought his lightsaber and his blaster and his belt of tools in
Hmm.
there?
Yeah.
What would that scene have been like? Very interesting. But of course, this is not how it happened
Yeah.
for storytelling purposes. He did bring the saber and he does power it on during this dream sequence. He does cut off Vader's head. Vader's head falls on the ground and poof, he sees his face within it. And I mean, sure, with the benefit of hindsight, everybody's like, yeah, whatever, who cares about that? So we all know. I'm like, you didn't know back then.
Hmm.
Neither did Luke, and so on and so forth. But
Yeah.
apparently Yoda knew. Apparently Obi-Wan knew. So these, what am I saying with all this stuff? The psychological underpinnings, the sometimes spiritual underpinnings, not religious ones, mind you, I should say. Not that it is bad. I'm just saying is there's a difference between psychological underpinnings and spiritual ones and religious ones. Um, those I feel are what make uh, storytelling or projects of art really stand the test of time. That's why I would say things like Metropolis, going all the way back to, I want to say that was 1933 or something like that.
I think it's before that.
Right, yeah, it sticks around. Or even The Great Dictator with
Yeah.
Chaplin.
Yeah.
Like, there are psychological things going on, not just the whole like, oh, what's that? They took away my wife. I'm gonna get you and I'm gonna get revenge on you. And it's like, John Christian is out for revenge. Like that's great. We love all those blockbuster movies, but they
Yeah.
come and they go, and you kind of like, well, it was an action adventure movie and he saved his girlfriend, but there's nothing else necessarily underneath all of that. But it's like, so then why is it that people still talk about Lord of the Rings? Again, yes, sure, mostly because of PJ and NLC, Peter Jackson and New Line Cinema, great stuff. But also because Tolkien had set these stories in place that they will not go away from your mind because of that.
The third book says here that courage is tempered by equivalent mastery over fear.
Yeah, that's a good one. I will say this too to help get that in a position where any listeners or watchers will be like, wait, what is it? What was that? It goes by too fast sometimes. People have to slow down and read it. But I'm not saying I directly took this from this thing, but there's an old John Wayne movie. I don't remember what it was, but I remember, he's getting on a horse. There's a young kid getting on a horse and he sees him. And he's just like, I just don't know if I can do this. And he says, hey, courage is being scared, but saddling up anyway. Yeah. And they get going. So this is what this tagline essentially embodies, is it's saying that it's not the absence of fear that makes you courageous. Because if there is no fear, then how can you be courageous? You already know you're going to succeed, right? If I say, hey, John, could you write a paragraph? You're like, sure, there's no fear. But if I said, John, I need you to write a 60,000 word book and you need to be done with it in a week. And I'm talking about editing, every level of et cetera, et cetera. No book. You need to be done in 1 week. Now you've got some fear,
Mhm.
right? Like now you might say, I deny your project. I'm not going to do it. But I'm saying
Sounds
is
like some
what
of the television shows I worked on.
that's what I'm saying, right?
You got
So it's
two
like,
weeks to get this out.
this is all I'm saying, John. So you know damn well, pardon my French, right? That fear is sort of welcomed. Sounds strange, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And
Yeah.
most viewers and readers, they'd be like, "What the hell is this guy talking about? He's saying he likes fear." I'm like, "That's not quite what I'm
No,
saying."
no, I know what you mean.
However, in the absence of fear, you probably definitely know you're not being challenged, So
And
that
also,
is to
if
me
there's a reason to fear and you have no fear, you're being stupid.
maybe, yeah,
You're just
exactly.
being
Like that's a
irresponsible.
must give us pause moment as well,
Yeah.
right? So courage is tempered by equivalent, meaning, equal
Equal. Yep.
mastery over fear. And
Okay.
that can be a deadly combination when you're like, do you have the strength to master your fear in this position? What's coming in this book that's going to challenge one or more of these characters in this book, in this series, that you're like, wait, what is what is
Hmm.
he? Oh no, no. And then if they look at the back, they might be like, no, like we'll see. You
Yeah.
will not understand it. It's actually, oops, if I just dip out here, it's actually right there because that
Yeah.
is the book's cover. Courage
Yep.
is tempered,
Yep.
but I mean, the readers, will would understand to some extent. And then once you complete the book, they'll be like, oh wow, I get it now. Damn, that was hardcore. You know.
Let me see if I understand. You're writing stories. Obviously, there's a conflict. Because stories without conflict aren't really stories.
There's
And
a
there's
lot of conflict in
characters,
these. Yeah.
and there's a plot. Do you intersperse some of your philosophies into the narrative so it's going along, and then you feel like you go aside a little bit and explain the philosophy and get back to the plot? Is that do I get that feeling from
I
you
think
correctly?
it's not the greatest assumption, and here's why, John, is I think you would need to read them first in order to comprehend, well, what is it that's going on here? But I would still say that there are heroes' journeys. There's tons of thematic underpinnings,
Hmm.
not unlike, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and The Matrix, at least the original trilogy, and even Harry Potter and whatnot. There's always that in what I like to call exemplary storytelling, right? You always have dramatic structure, character archetypes who also have their arcs. That's the most important part. It's not enough to have a character archetype. You must have it where at least some of those characters are arcing. They're changing. Something is affecting them in different ways. They have to adapt. But also color palettes, right? These are really important to the world building and kind of the subconscious things that you're going to do to readers, well, viewers, if it's a movie and whatnot.
Hmm.
Like, just as a quick shout out, Blade Runner 2049 is one of my favorite films that demonstrates all of the opposites. This is Denis Villeneuve, I think, is the director's name. But it demonstrates absolutely every aspect of storytelling in what I would like to say is one of the most exemplary ways. For anybody who has not seen BR 2049, they really should. It's completely different from Ridley Scott's wonderful entry into the series, but it's better in 100 different ways. But the
Hmm.
point being is, I like to operate, John, on as many levels as possible so that going back to production, right, John? We want the costuming to exude the character. We want the makeup to exude the character. We want the props to lift the actors and the characters to be able to do the things that make. Well, are they supposed to be weak? Well, let's put them like this. Are they supposed to be super strong? Well, we better put them in a position of strength now, shan't we? So I try to operate on all those levels. So there are places where, for example, the wise men or men or whatever, the wise dragons, if you will, impart wisdom,
Okay.
to the younger characters. Go figure. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
We have Obi-Wan Kenobis and
Yeah.
Gandalfs and Morpheuses, what's the other one from Harry Potter? Dumpling. What am I saying? Dumple, Dumple.
I don't
I
know. I
don't know the
never read
wizard's
the
name
book.
in
I don't,
Harry
haven't
Potter,
read those
but
books.
I'm close. But
Yeah.
I'm not. I didn't get it right.
Mhm.
But you get the idea, right? The
Sure. Sure.
wise men, right, John? There's always there's these archetypes. So yeah, those can be the moments where like philosophy enters the scene,
Right.
and it's
Sure.
not only meant for the characters to soak it in, but sometimes it's meant for the readers. One particular line that Artemis, my kind of wizard-like dragon, says. He says, "Reflect upon the past, embrace your present, orchestrate our futures." And you're like, okay, like he just dropped a bomb on us. Now, we don't just randomly have him walk in and say that. It wouldn't make any sense. But of course, when the moment is appropriate, this happens, and you're kind of like, interesting. This is good wisdom for this character. But wow, that's a good wisdom for me.
Dragons are something that I don't quite understand. Is there a symbolism for what do they symbolize? What does dragons mean?
In almost every culture and society over thousands of years, the concept of dragons has been there. It's
Yeah,
it's existed in one form or another.
that's true.
Sometimes it's been almost akin to saying, I think these were real flying lizards that were like in the air and like whatever. And in other cases, it's just pure conjecture and metaphor and all that stuff. However, they've been there for so many thousands of years. I think they represent mystery,
Hmm.
danger, wisdom. In most cases, almost every culture, even video games that I've played, they're always having like the dragon tome of knowledge, and they're always super intelligent, like
Yeah.
always. I've never seen it where they're just really, really dumb. And they're, well, I shouldn't say never. There's never say never. But the point being is, there's so many different ways of interpreting them. In most cases, in most stories, they are the enemies. They are to be slain. That
Hmm.
is the ones keeping you from your goals. They hold the princess of, the
Yeah. Yeah.
of town X or Y or Z
They
in a
usually breathe
medieval.
fire too, that's pretty dangerous.
Right, yeah. So in my storytelling, this is a completely different universe where the dragons are the heroes and the villains, and they all have different powers. I mean, like I try to keep it where it's not so foreign that you'll just be like, I can't keep straight of all this. But like, the red dragons, they are fire dragons. They're kind
Yeah.
of ruby dragons. The more sapphire style dragons, the bluer ones, they tend to be more ice. But some of the dragons do not spit uh, acid, fire, ice, electricity. They just don't have that power. So
Hmm.
it's more like their jaws and claws and wings and tails and stuff like that. And that's fine. By the way, you'll find that that's part of the storytelling. The main hero that we follow throughout the whole course of this series, and his name is Jackie, or actually his long name is Jack Ralvian. Um, but Jackie does not have any real powers, so to speak. And this is, of course, by design. He's also relatively smaller for his age. I mean, he's still a dragon, but right. And so in the beginning, he kind of starts off as the farm boy, the kind of Frodo or Luke Skywalker or
Okay.
Neo, if you will, right? Just a lowly computer programmer with no, he means nothing to this world. And the same as Harry, who's living in a bloody stairwell or something like that, in his grandma's basement or whatever, you know?
Hmm.
So it's like I use the dragons as metaphorical allegory that can be applied to us, John.
That's
You
what I was
might
feeling. I was feeling that from what you're saying. It sounds like us.
Right, you might or might not relate to
Yeah.
character X, Y, or Z. I will say this, I've had many readers at this point email me and say, "Oh, Matthew," and I'm proud to say this. I mean, I don't want to tear up or whatever, but like some of these stories, John, have been just beautiful. They're just touching, where they're like,
Mm,
"Oh, Matthew, this character reminded me of this, that, and the other, and it was so
mm,
much this, and da 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 da." And I just, I know obviously you didn't know him, obviously, and da da da, but this, they'll go on and tell me about Llewellyn or Artemis or Legimoto. What a great name too for a character. That one,
yeah.
by the way, Legimoto is the first character you meet, and Leiji is based off of none other than Leiji Matsumoto, who, for any readers or viewers who don't know who that is, he unfortunately passed away in 2023. He was pretty old at this point, but he is massively revered in Japan as essentially the great grandfather of anime. And some
Okay.
of the characters that he's built there's statues of them in Japan, just in case people are like, well, who's Leiji Matsumoto and why should we care
Yeah.
about you making an homage to him with Leiji? Um, he
There you go.
built a series called Yamato, Galaxy 999, Captain Harlock. He is a legendary sort of Japanese artist. And
Yeah.
so I tend to, try to make sure that the characters have relatability to humans, but that you're like, wait, at the same time, you're like, yo, these are still dragons. Like they
Sure.
have some powers and abilities, and the kind of courage that they show John too is a lot more Shakespearean than you or I or most anybody else, And I think that's important. It's very akin to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Ang Lee's wonderful film. Everything's heightened. The characters are super dramatic, and everything's like, oh, you want to fight? Okay, ha, chua, pa, 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 pa." It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
got it has that kind of moment. There are those moments like when the characters fight, you're like, it feels like two martial arts warriors, but with powers of shooting acid and wings, the size of, whatever your living room, and a tail that, essentially is like a freaking morning star, a big mace on a chain ready to whip you to into a mashed potatoes pile. So,
What would, yeah. What was writing those kind of scenes like? The action, the fighting scenes. I myself have had to write a couple, and since I'm not really a fighter, I found it difficult at first, but I got into it. What did it come naturally for you?
I can share some advice on that too, John. I would say this, that so because of my background in martial arts and performance on stage and in staged combat, and then also choreographing fight scenes that not only involve myself but other folks. In fact, I'm about to have the 10 and 20-year anniversary of several of my live Star Wars style projects, which I won't go into here. But the point is this, is that, so remember, always remember, storytelling is still storytelling, even when the drama is at the crazy moment where it's like, John, you know what I said before about this, and you're like, hey, hey, don't do this, and you're like, that's it. I can't take it anymore. You gotta die. And I mean, I'm not saying that's how the lines would go, but it's like when you're like, uh-oh, these characters are done talking. There's no more possibility for a discussion to be had. They cannot be separated. They are going to fight. So hence the Shakespearean line, they fight. um, but when it comes to like books, I feel that an author can go the wrong direction and start saying, John attacked Matthew at the head. Matthew parried up high and made sure to block his line so that and you're like, no, don't. don't describe every single fencing move or whatever. You will delete the tempo at which you want to keep that pacing in the book. You want the readers to be going like, oh my God, like, what the hell? What the hell's going on? It's chaos. Especially if it's supposed to be chaos. Like, it's one thing if you have a duel where it's just John and Matthew and there's nobody else. Like, that's it. It's me and you in a field, nobody else here. Okay, you can play around. But if you have a full-on war, like, what is it? The Battle of Helm's Deep. Or you have, I don't remember the ones in Game of Thrones. I never really saw any of it. I love George R. R. Martin, by the way, but like, what the hell? Like, there's hundreds of people. So at that point, I feel like it's less about, oh, what do I know about armor? And what do I know about this? And I must describe the exact length of this blade. I'd be like, you could do that, but I don't think that's a good idea. It's probably better to focus on the storytelling. You want to have a moment where you're like clearly this, the musculature of, character X, blah 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 blah, and the weakness and starvation of this character was formed, and then suddenly they're fighting, and now the audience is sitting there going, "Oh my God, he hasn't eaten for a week, and he's skinny, and he's pathetic, and this guy's a muscle-bound beef, like rah, whatever." That is dramatic. But if I sit there and say, and then John lunged and and Matthew used a circular parry and then enveloped his blade into an expulsion, you're like, what the hell are you getting so technical for in this
Right.
particular case? Like, if you want to show off a match of fencers, like if it's like, okay, now we're going to have a duel between two masters of fencing, and it's like, that's different. Maybe you start to, I got to know something about fencing now, the writer might say. But
Sure.
if you're doing like a full-on battle and it's just supposed to be dramatic and all that stuff, it's like, don't describe the individual actions super specifically. Instead, make sure to keep the storytelling moving and that intention and obstacle between the characters strong and in play. Where
Hmm.
you feel the dramatic tension and all that stuff. But you don't necessarily need to know, oh, well, his armor was made of steel and this one was only iron and therefore slightly weaker and therefore when his moves hit, you're like, ah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
boring. Don't do that.
yeah, yeah. I've noticed that book four has part one only. What's that all about?
Okay, so book four right now, it is complete, but I decided to digitally release it, only half of it for the time being. I may not ever decide to do the part twos digitally and whatnot. And there's many reasons for this, which I won't go into all of them. But the one primary reason is it's just a lot of it is because these days, John, the digital piracy, the ability for people to do digital piracy is pretty high. Also, I don't see tons and tons of return on the digital books, at least from my perspective. And also, um, I'm unable to give you the experience that I really want with the digital versions for some of the reasons that I mentioned previously in our interview here, which is like the illustrations. I cannot include 100% of them in the digital versions for several reasons. One of which is I don't want to because I don't want to give away all of those illustrations for people to then just, oh, okay, I can just cut and paste this and use it for myself because digitally you could do that. And then two, it's really a space thing, a capacity thing for the digital documents. If I were to just upload my book and then include all the images, it exceeds the file size limitation for most platforms, which I knew 100% of the time, even way back when. So it would just make no sense to put all of them in there. And also, they don't propagate properly, obviously. I cannot control when you see those directly, like under what paragraph and under what, format. And this makes obvious sense to people because you can, take your device and turn it and, configure it and whatever you want to it. So you're not viewing the pages the way that I intended, obviously, because it's on a dynamic display, if you will. So that's part of it. We'll see what happens in the future, but yeah, I'm going to be releasing the print versions of Diamond Dragons for on the winter solstice, and I release all my books on the solstices.
I was about to ask you that. I saw that in one of the emails that you release books on the solstice, whether that is December or July, or is it June?
June and December, so they're on 6 and 12, just like the equinoxes would be on the 3 and 9, so March and September.
So are you
But
locked into that? So we should expect right now we're doing this conversation in October of 2024. So in a couple of months, is there going to be something released?
yeah, depending on when this video is released, people will be able to find my the print versions on my website, or at least links to it from my website on the winter solstice, which is 12/21 of 2024. And that's essentially a kind of a running theme. Again, I don't want to go into too many details. People can find this out throughout the course of my books, but I decided to use the solstices not only to keep me on schedule, if you will. Like I always love having deadlines, and I think deadlines are important. And I actually like deadlines that you can't move. And since I can't move the solstices,
That's
it's a
right.
pretty good choice, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I like that. But in addition to that, even before I decided to release on the solstices, celestial events in the storytelling of Diamond Dragons are a thing. In book one, there's an eclipse, which the bad guys use to their advantage. And you're like, gee, I wonder what they do because of the eclipse. And you're like, yeah. So they're bone and ghost dragons. You're like, bone and ghost dragons, darkness.
Yeah, sure.
Get it? Like, do you
Yeah.
get it? But the point is, so like eclipses, then they have like equinoxes, solstices, and there's more to it that I don't want to reveal. But yeah, celestial events are part of the Diamond Dragons series, and therefore I figured, well, if I was going to have any deadlines, if I just decided to do Christmas, it would be, I mean, a missed opportunity. It's like, yeah, release these on the solstices. So I decided to do that.
Should we be expecting more books from you next June then?
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, like if I don't die, sorry, I'm dead.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, the goal is Diamond Dragons 5 for 2025 and Diamond Dragons 6 for 2026. I'm not really entirely sure if I'm ever going to approach the concept of opening that can of worms and whoop ass for DD 7 through 12. I don't know if I have
Mhm.
the strength. But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I feel that at this point, there's more than enough work for people to kind of browse through and look through. Like it will keep me busy for a very long time. And I'm still in that kind of process of deciding, do I ever want to approach doing audio book versions of these things? Because that's just an enormous amount of work to undertake. And I do not have the kind of resources that some folks might with great riches and wonderful things like that. So yeah,
Okay.
that would be a thing. But I mean, I'm still attempting. Maybe one day I'll say, okay, I'll read the first 12 chapters of DD1 straight out of the book and all that stuff. We'll see.
Sure. Excellent. All right, Matthew. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and I wish you all the success moving forward.
Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it, and it is just a pleasure to chat with you. And feel free to, ring me up another time. Tell me about your books. I want to hear more about
Absolutely, sure.
your
And
journey.
and next year, if you want to be on the show, talk some more about Diamond Dragons, I'd love to have you back on.
Absolutely. I'm always up for talking about storytelling or production in general because, as we know, there is a big hunk of ice under that tip of the iceberg.
For sure. All right. You take care of yourself now.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, and if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then I invite you to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment if you wish. And if you are an author, I would sure love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing, and remember to be kind to one another.
You'll catch a dose. Only if you want it. The makes and break beat live.
is when it makes your backbone twitch and your ass go into a spasm.